I hadn't even seen anything at this point. I was just finding out it was real. And I
That's
researched
interesting.
heavily for 10 years before I put out my first book in 1996 about healing cases. But yeah, I was
Okay.
writing
People
articles like
healing
that.
other people, is that what you mean? Or
No, people being taken on board
spontaneous?
and being
Okay.
healed
Oh,
by ETs,
got
or
it.
having a beam of light come down on them and they're healed of a flesh wound, perhaps, or nearsightedness, or
Wow.
rheumatism, or what have you, paralysis. And
How about like
surprisingly,
student debt? That would be nice. Could they erase that?
we've yet to find a case of that, but
Yeah. Yeah. No,
knowing how
that's
strange this
interesting.
field is, now I'm
Yeah.
on a mission. I'll find it.
Right? You never know. This guy's like, yeah, they erased my debt. This is amazing. That's funny. No, that's interesting. What a fascinating beginning to start like your first book, right? Typically people will maybe stick in a more general area and kind of get maybe more, zeroed in on things as they went. Like what attracted you to make your first book about that in particular?
It was just pure happenstance, really, because I was expecting to write an article. I had just interviewed this lady who was having full-on experiences. I mean, pretty much as extensive as they get in terms of being taken on board and hybrid babies, the whole deal.
Yeah,
It was a lot to take in. But she
sure.
described how she had been diagnosed with a cyst in her fallopian tubes and was going to have surgery. It was fully documented. And the day before surgery, she had a visitation, went to the surgery. They couldn't find the cyst. They found evidence that she had been operated on. So it was clearly a healing. Certainly, that's how she interpreted it. And I
Wow.
remembered, oh, well, there's those police officers in Damon, Texas, another famous case where a UFO came down, shone a beam of light on one of the officers and healed him of a baby alligator bite wound on his finger. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and another case in France from Jacques Vallée, who a medical doctor, was hit by a beam of light and cured of partial paralysis and an axe wound on his foot. I knew of a few other cases. I thought this would be a good article. By then I had, 50, 100 books and all the MUFON journals, and I was joining every UFO organization. There were quite a few.
Yeah.
So I found like 30, 40 cases right off the bat. There's
Oh,
no way this
wow.
is going to fit in an article. So that's
Sure.
how I'm like, oh, well, this would be a good subject for a book. It's never been covered before, not to this extent.
Sure. Oh, that's
Yeah.
very cool. Wow, that's so neat. So where do you go from there with that knowledge, right? Like after this book, like, you know what I mean? Where do you head in this field from there?
Yeah. Well, after doing that, I had put together another book about my family and friends' sightings, and actually sold the book, but it never got in bookstores. The publisher was terrible. This UFO healing book got accepted by the first publisher. But then I thought, let's try another, because I was investigating a wave of sightings this time over Topanga Canyon, my hometown. This is
Okay.
again in Southern California. And a bunch of people had called the police on June 14th, 1992, called the local newspaper reporting UFOs. And I mean, we had people calling about UFOs landing next to their house, chasing cars down the road, people being taken on board, sightings, of course, the whole deal.
Everything. Yeah.
Really active over June of 1992 through the next 2 years. And it was my sister-in-law who's, stepped in and says, this would make a good book. Like, I think you might be right. So this was a huge investigation. I mean, I contacted the police, gave them my number. They were referring calls to me. I was putting up flyers.
Oh,
Every
wow.
time I put up a flyer at the local bulletin board, it would get taken down the next day. I go back
Ugh,
up there, put it up. Later, this Topanga is a small community, smallish, 8,000 residents. And people
sure.
started telling
Oh,
me,
yeah.
I went to a friend's house and I saw your flyer up on their wall. I'm like, oh, well, now I know who's taking it. But yeah, I got
Yeah.
lots of calls from people and basically collected about 50 or 100 different encounter stories and
Wow.
tried to
Put that
sell
book
that
out.
book. Uh, I had a hard time selling that book. I sent it off to
Wow.
49 publishers before Llewellyn took it. It did really well too. and that kind of kicked the ball forward. And from that point on, it was, established me, I guess, enough to where I was able to contact publishers. And soon they were calling me like, we want a book from you. I'm like, really? Okay. And by this point, I was starting to get calls from radio stations and conventions and TV shows like Sightings and Encounters and others. So interest, I kind of caught the wave of when Whitley Strieber's book came out and Bud Hopkins' book Intruders. And so interest in this subject was exploding right when I got into this field, which was, late 1980s.